You are listening to Startup Lessons, a leading podcast series where you get startup lessons from global business gurus, business leaders, and Ivy League universities. This startup series is brought to you by www.startup.tk. Today's episode is...
Okay, so today we're going to dive deep into something that's been kind of under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. It's this huge shift in power that's happening in the tech world.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone's always talking about Silicon Valley and coming out of the U.S.
Right.
But honestly, things are changing quickly. And the East India, China, Japan, South Korea are really making some major moves. And I think for a lot of us, it's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we're going to try to do today is really break down what's driving this surge in tech innovation in the East. And I think for our listeners, they're smart. They want to understand this stuff, but they don't necessarily have time to read a bunch of dense reports.
Absolutely.
So we're going to try to extract the really crucial it's about how these places are using crazy fast internet speeds and AI and really changing the whole landscape of technology.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is really interesting here is how this shift is happening. It used to be that the West was the dominant force in technology.
Yeah.
All the innovation came from, the US and Europe, and it flowed out to the rest of the world.
Right.
But now we're seeing a potential reversal of that flow.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
So where do we even start with all this?
Well, I think a good place to begin is with the foundation.
Okay.
Which is really the internet infrastructure.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Without that superhighway, all the cool stuff we're talking about with AI and everything else just wouldn't be possible.
Right. So the internet is the base layer, and then you build all this innovation on top of it.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's start with India then. What was it like in the early days?
Well, in the early days of the internet in India, things were pretty slow.
I imagine so, yeah.
They had these leased lines that were incredibly slow, 9.6 kilobits per second.
Wow, that's slower than dial-up, right?
Yeah, basically.
It's hard to even imagine.
I know, right?
Trying to do anything online at that speed.
Exactly. And it wasn't really until around 2004 when they implemented their broadband policy that things started to change.
Okay, so what did that policy do?
Well, for the first time, it actually defined what broadband was.
Okay.
Which seems kind of basic, but it was a really important step because it set a minimum speed requirement of 256 kilobits per second.
Oh, wow. So that was considered high speed at the time.
Yeah, it was a big improvement.
Still kind of slow compared to what we have now, but a huge step in the right direction.
Exactly. And then things really accelerated when they shifted to wireless.
Okay.
Particularly with the 3G and 4G auctions that started happening in 2010.
Yeah, I remember that being a big deal all over the world, really.
Yeah, it was game changer.
And now, of course, they're rolling out 5G.
Exactly.
Which is going to be another huge leap forward.
Absolutely. And one of the most incredible things to see is the sheer explosion in data consumption that's happened in India over the past decade.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of numbers are we talking about here?
Well, the compound annual growth rate over the past 10 years has been 54%.
Wow, 54%. So that means that people are using way, way more data now than they were just a few years ago.
Yeah, it's a pretty mind-boggling increase.
And what's driving that? Is it just more people having access to the internet, or are people just using it for more things?
I think it's a combination of both. More people are coming online every day thanks to things like cheaper smartphones and data plans.
Right.
But people are also just using the internet for more things. They're streaming videos, they're playing online games, they're using social media, they're shopping, they're doing everything online.
Yeah, it's the internet is becoming an essential utility, almost like electricity or water.
Yeah, exactly. It's becoming indispensable.
Okay. So we've got India really stepping on the gas pedal when it comes to internet. And, we've got this parallel story happening in China.
Yeah.
With also this huge push to connect everyone.
Absolutely.
And they had their own challenges, right? The rural digital divide.
Yeah, they had a massive digital divide, with vast rural areas lacking even basic internet access.
Right, and they tackled that head on, I guess.
Yeah, they did. They launched this initiative called the Connecting Every Village Project back in 2004.
Okay, and what was the goal of that?
Well, the goal was pretty ambitious. It was to bring internet access to every single village in China.
Wow, that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, it was a massive effort, but they were really committed to it, and they made incredible progress.
And then on top of that, they were also just massively expanding their bandwidth overall, right?
Yeah, that's right. By 2011, they had already surpassed the US in terms of total telecom bandwidth.
Wow, that's pretty amazing considering how much later they got started than the U.S.
Yeah, it's a testament to how quickly they were able to catch up and then surpass the established players.
And then they doubled that bandwidth again by 2014.
Yeah, they were just going full steam ahead.
And I guess that's what laid the groundwork for their 2013 national broadband strategy.
Exactly. That strategy was all about building the infrastructure for the future. They wanted to get fiber to 96% of villages and 4G coverage to 95% by 2018.
Wow, and they pretty much hit those targets, right?
Yeah, they pretty much did. They were incredibly successful in implementing that strategy.
So what's the impact of all this, all this investment in internet infrastructure?
Well, the impact has been profound. It's enabled China to become a global leader in digital technology.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the numbers. Over 1 billion people in China are now online. That's more than any other country in the world.
That's incredible. And I guess it makes sense then that they're also leading the way in things like mobile payments and e-commerce.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have these massive companies like Alibaba and Tencent that are just dominating those spaces.
Right. And they're also investing heavily in AI and other cutting-edge technologies.
Yeah, they're really at the forefront of innovation in many areas.
Okay, so we've got India and China both making these massive strides in internet infrastructure. But then you've also got these established tech powerhouses like Japan and South Korea.
Yeah, those countries have been leaders in technology for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, Japan with its early embrace of mobile internet through iMode.
Yeah, iMode was a really big deal back in the late 90s. It was one of the first successful mobile internet platforms.
Right, and they've also been really committed to building out fiber optic networks.
Yeah, they have one of the most extensive fiber optic networks in the world.
Okay, and what about South Korea? I mean, they've consistently been ranked at the top for ICT development globally.
Yeah, South Korea is a really interesting case study because they've been so focused on technology for so long.
Yeah, and they've had some really strong government support for their tech sector, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the 1980s, they launched this national broadband program that really laid the foundation for their digital success.
Right.
And they've just continued to invest heavily in technology ever since.
So what are some of the results of that?
Well, they have some of the fastest internet speeds in the world, both mobile and broadband. And they have an incredibly high smartphone ownership rate. It's actually the highest in the world.
Yeah, I've heard that it's practically impossible to function in South Korea without a smartphone.
Yeah, it's pretty much true. Everything is done online there.
So I'm starting to see a pattern here. It seems like all of these countries that are making these big leaps in tech innovation have one thing in common.
What's that?
They all have really strong internet infrastructure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the foundation for everything else.
It's like you were saying earlier about the superhighway. You can't have all these amazing cars and trucks if you don't have a good road to drive on.
Exactly. It's the same with technology. You need that robust infrastructure to support all the innovation.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of bandwidth.
Right.
But now let's move on to the second key driver of all this technological change, which is the widespread adoption of AI.
Yeah, AI is really the engine that's powering a lot of these advancements.
Okay, so what's making AI so accessible now?
Well, one of the biggest factors is the rise of open source AI tools.
What are those?
So these are basically free software libraries and frameworks that anyone can use to build AI applications.
Oh, wow. So you don't need to be like a giant tech company with tons of resources to get started with AI anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's
Yeah.
become much more democratized.
What are some examples of these open source AI tools?
Some of the most popular ones are TensorFlow and PyTorch.
Okay. And what do those do?
Well, they provide a lot of the building blocks that you need to create AI models.
Okay.
So instead of having to write all the code from scratch, you can use these pre-built components and just focus on the specific task that you're trying to accomplish.
Okay. That makes sense. And I guess that's why we're seeing so many companies in the East like really embracing AI.
Yeah, exactly. They're able to take advantage of these tools and build really sophisticated AI applications.
Okay, so give me some examples of companies that are doing this.
Well, in China, you have companies like Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba.
Right.
They're all using AI in really interesting ways.
So like what specifically are they doing with it?
Well, Baidu, for example, is using AI to improve its search engine, and they're also developing self-driving cars.
Oh, wow. Yeah, self-driving cars are like the holy grail of AI right now.
Yeah, it's a really hot area of research and development.
Okay, and what about Tencent?
Tencent is using AI in its gaming and social media platforms to improve the user experience, and they're also using it to develop new products and services.
Okay, and Alibaba?
Alibaba is using AI to personalize its e-commerce recommendations, and they're also using it to manage their vast logistics network.
Yeah, I mean, they're like the Amazon of China, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so that's China. What about India?
Well, India has a long history of being a leader in IT services.
Yes, right? I mean, a lot of companies outsource their tech work to India.
Exactly. And now they're really starting to leverage that expertise in AI.
So they're not just like coding for other companies anymore. They're actually developing their own AI solutions.
Yeah, that's right. They're moving up the value chain.
Okay, and what are some examples of Indian companies that are doing this?
Well, there are a lot of startups that are popping up, but some of the bigger players include Infosys, Wipro, and Tata Consultancy Services.
Okay, and they're all developing AI-powered software.
Yeah, they're working on things like chatbots, predictive analytics, and machine learning algorithms.
Wow, so India is really becoming a major player in the AI space.
Yeah, they're definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so we've talked about the software side of things.
Right.
But what about the hardware? I mean, you need powerful computers to run all these AI applications.
Yeah, that's true. And that's where companies like TSMC in Taiwan and Samsung and LG in South Korea come in.
Right.
They're all leading the way in semiconductor manufacturing.
Okay, and why is that so important?
Well, semiconductors are the brains of all electronic devices.
Well,
they're what make computers, smartphones, and everything else work.
Right.
And these companies are making the most advanced semiconductors in the world.
And why are they able to do that?
Well, they've invested heavily in research and development.
Okay.
And they have really skilled workforces.
So it's not just about the money, it's also about the people.
Yeah, exactly. You need both to be successful in this industry.
Okay, so we've talked about the internet infrastructure, the AI software, and the hardware.
Right.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle that I think is really important.
What's that?
It's the people, the talent pool.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All of these countries that we've been talking about have a lot of really smart and talented people.
Yeah, and they're not just engineers and scientists either, right?
No, that's right. They also have a lot of entrepreneurs, designers, and other creative professionals.
And those people are all essential for building a thriving tech ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. You need all of those different skill sets to be successful.
So it's not just about having the technology, it's about having the people who can create and use that technology.
Exactly. It's the combination of the two that's really driving this tech boom in the East.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But for our listeners who are maybe just tuning in now, can you sum up what we've been talking about?
Sure. So basically what we've been discussing is the rapid rise of technological innovation in the East, specifically in countries like India, China, Japan, and South Korea.
Oh, right.
And what's driving this rise is a combination of factors, including faster internet speeds, widespread adoption of AI, and a large pool of talented people.
Right. And this is really changing the global landscape of technology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It used to be that the West was the dominant force, but now the East is catching up and in some cases even surpassing the West.
Yeah. It's a really exciting time to be following this stuff.
It is for sure.
So for our listeners out there who are now hopefully a little more informed about this power shift in the tech world,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
How do you think these advancements in the East are going to affect your own life in the years to come?
Yeah. That's a great question to ponder.
I mean, it's really going to touch every aspect of our lives,
Yeah.
from the way we work to the way we communicate to the way we entertain ourselves.
Absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Yeah. So think about it and let us know what you come up with.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
That concludes today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want hands-on help in crafting a marketing plan and growth hack your startup, get in touch with Aditya Basu, publisher of Startup Lessons, for one-to-one startup building and growth hacking advice. With Aditya's help, you can ensure that your team is well-suited for success. You can book Startup Advisory via WhatsApp. Get startup lessons from global business gurus, business leaders, and Ivy League universities. Visit www.startup.tk today.